32nd Guam Youth Congress is hereby called to order. I now call on Representative Isa Valencia for the prayer. Please stand.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, please guide us as we go through this session. Guide our hearts and our minds. Please impart your wisdom upon us so that we may reach a successful conclusion. In this we pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. I now call on the Legislative Secretary Lorenzo for the singing of the national anthem and the Guam hymn.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly beheld at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts deep watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the Fanog chamor purita nonta kantai masunanya ni toru bilukan. Harai honra, harai gloria, aviva isla sempana. Harai honra, harai gloria, aviva isla sempana. Toiui tempui pax paranita, zangini langit na bendition. Contra peligrum, nafam suffluam, sus proteis languam. Contra peligrum, nafam suffluam, sus proteis languam.
I now call on Representative Quintanilla for the recitation of the Inifres.
Inifresi, irimastaculum ihimasoku, imastaculum I corazon, zanimas figo nainas nyahu, u fresen maisazu, barbaibutei, zanu defendi, ihiningi, I culturan, I lenguahi, I airi, I hanum, zanitanon samor, iri shoku, dairetsu, inazu stata, estiu afirma, Evli Biblia, zani benderahu, I benderem wa.
Please be seated. Mr. Recording Secretary, roll call, please.
Representative Travis Blas, Representative Adriana Cruz, Representative Noel Brandon DeGracia, Representative Lauren Dinsman, Representative Abel Isaiah Duenas, Representative Davin Fellison, Representative Prairie Garrido, Representative Al Edrich Labang, Secretary Stephanie Lorenzo, Representative Jewel Amber Maige, Representative Valina Matanani, Representative Janae Pareda, Representative Zachary Pierre Paul, Representative DeMarco Kineni, Representative Tristan Quintanilla, Vice Speaker Jacob Richards, Representative Casey Rosario, Representative Elijah Santos, Representative Javan Santos, Representative Vicente Blas Tyron, Representative Kyla Ann Trinidad, Speaker Christian Valencia, Representative Isabel Valencia. Mr. Speaker, there is a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Recording Secretary. We're now on item 7, the call for the approval of the legislative journal. Representative Lang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move to approve legislative journal dated on July 20th, 2019.
There's been a motion to approve the legislative journal for July 20, 2019. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Mr. Speaker, I move to waive items 8 through 11 of the session agenda.
There's been a motion to waive items 8 to 11 of our legislative session agenda. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Mr. Speaker, I move that all bills and resolution be given their first reading.
There's been a motion that all bills and resolutions be given their first reading. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Mr. Speaker, I move to waive items 14 and 15.
There's been a motion to waive items 14 and 15. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We are in recess.
We're back from recess. We are now in motions. Speaker Valencia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to move to place Bill number 22-32 onto the second reading file and be afforded the opportunity to discuss.
On the motion, is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Speaker,
Speaker.
you may do your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bill number 22-32, the Welcome to the Workforce Act of 2019, would waive government fees for documents needed by first-time job seekers. And under this act, a person applying for a job for the first time will not have to pay fees for a police clearance, a court clearance, a health certificate, and any other documents required by employers that are issued by the government. Now, some of us might say that these fees are just $10, $15, or $20, small enough for people to afford. The cost of these documents may just be a few bucks many of us can spare, but to some, they are barriers to employment, especially in these austere times with high prices of gasoline and an increase in the cost of living on Guam. And it also doesn't help that some of these fees have gone up. A recent report by the Guam Daily Post showed that the judiciary recently raised the fees for court clearances from $10 to $20, almost double. They've almost doubled their fees. And for those applying for jobs, the bite of a slight increase will be felt, a reality that many officials have already stated and have realized. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Welcome to the Workforce Act, its primary aim is to remove the barriers of employment for many of our island's first-time job seekers, many of whom are our constituents, young people, our friends. And our island and nation recently celebrated Labor Day on Monday. And what better way to honor the work of labor unions and activists by welcoming first-time job seekers to our island's workforce? And I would like to thank the Committee on Labor for their work on this bill, and I'd also like to thank my colleagues for their support of this bill, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the main motion, anyone wishes to be recognized? Representative Santos, you're recognized.
I'd like to ask questions to the primary sponsor, if he would yield.
Mr. Speaker, will you yield?
Yes, I do, Mr. Speaker.
So my first question would be, do you know where these fees, the funds from these fees typically went to? I know some of them are court and police clearance, so they may have gone to like many different types of funds, but do you have an idea of like where the funds went, when these fees are collected, what funds or where they go to?
Are you specifically for the court clearances? I know that they go into for the judiciary's operations, and that's why they've raised these fees recently, so that it may help with their budgetary constraints.
Representative Santos, does it satisfy your answer, your question?
So is the court clearance the only one that you're sure where the fees go?
Mr.
Speaker, do you have the answer for the question?
For most of these, like for a police clearance, court clearance, and a health certificate, they usually go to the operations of the agencies that issue them.
Representative Santos, this satisfies your answer, your question.
Yes, thank you. So my next question would be, in terms of revenue from the government, we're talking about the revenue and the budget cuts. I was wondering, and I apologize, I wasn't here when the committee discussed the bill, so that's why I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to ask these questions. Is there an estimate that you'd be able to give us as to how these fees being exempted for first-time employees might affect the revenue stream or the budget? Like how much, do you have an idea of how much we're intended to lose from this bill?
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the good representative for asking this a good question. Hopefully, I hope to get a fiscal note on this bill when we hopefully pass it. But I know that these exemptions are only it's a one-time thing for these first-time job seekers. So once they avail of the exemption, they can never avail of it again, because you can only be a first-time job seeker once.
Representative Santos. Or
Sorry.
do you have any further?
So hopefully the fiscal impact will be small, but there's I'd like to hopefully when we pass this bill get a fiscal note so we can get a proper an official fiscal impact report. Thank you.
Representative Santos. So
Yes, that does satisfy my question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to get that on the record just to have an understanding of what the bill, I guess I'm trying to say what the bill, I wanted to put it on the record that the bill will have budgetary impacts, and we recognize that. But at the end of the day, I wanted to highlight the fact that for many people who are first starting to get into the workforce, I believe that this bill will be a tremendous help to them. We can just having an idea that this will have a negative impact on the budget, no matter how small, is always important to recognize. But ultimately, the costs that will be lost from this one-time fee for new people to the workforce in Guam, I think that this is a great bill. I think this is a great bill, and it eases the burden for a lot of people to have access to employment here on Guam, because just the list of all these different types of fees that are required to pay in order to get employment, that I can honestly see how that's a barrier to a lot of people. And I do believe that this bill will help. But, however, I do still have one more question for you, for the primary sponsor, if he will yield.
Mr. Speaker, would you yield?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Is first-time job seekers defined as the first-time job seeker, first time someone is employed on Guam, or is that defined as the first time a person is seeking a job? For example, if a person was employed in another location, will they be qualified for this first-time job seeker waiver?
I intended for first-time job seekers on Guam. So once you start out on Guam, hopefully you can avail of these exemptions.
Okay, understood. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, because if anything, perhaps maybe perhaps maybe the sponsor will be, or perhaps maybe an amendment will follow in order to clarify that definition, because there may, in terms of proof of eligibility, there may be a difficult time verifying any first-time job seeker. So maybe some more clarification in the bill is called into question. But I also wanted to ask, what type of proof of eligibility would someone be able to use to verify that this is their first time being employed on Guam? If you had an idea, because the bill, Section 4 does specify that there is a form of being able to prove eligibility to this program, and I was wondering what that eligibility might look like.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that question from the good representative. The proof of eligibility, as stated in Section 4, so first-time job seekers will have to prepare a signed affidavit that they would submit to the Department of Labor so that they can avail of these exemptions. And it will include their full name, their date of birth, and their last 4 digits so that they can be tracked. And as we all know, any signed affidavit that you submit so that you can avail of these exemptions is, if you violate them, you'll be subject to fabrication and falsification laws that are criminal.
Mr. Representative Rosado, sorry, this satisfies your question?
Yes, thank you, and thank you to the sponsor for yielding to all my questions. Ultimately, I would like to express my support for this bill, because I do feel like if there's any way that we can ease the barrier, at least on the governmental level, to entering into the workforce. I remember that a lot of times something as small as a health certificate and the process, the costs and the process can be tedious in order to enter into the workforce. So I do believe that if we will allow for these types of exemptions to be able to go through, I fully intend to support this bill. Actually, I have one more question. Mr. Chair, if the sponsor is willing to yield.
Mr. Speaker, would you yield?
Of course, Mr. Speaker.
If a person's employment does not require all the documents that are listed in the list in Section 3 covered governmental transactions, but they but further down they are hoping to obtain that for future employment, does that mean that they are only allowed to obtain the documents for their first time employment that is applicable to their first time employment, or potentially does that mean that with these exemptions listed for their first time employment, will they be able to get every single one of them for free as long as they are entering the workforce for the first time, even if their job doesn't require it?
No, it would specifically for first-time employment. The listing that I've included is for, they're usually requirements prior to employment, or like during the selection process or during the interview process when they ask you, when employers ask of employees of these candidates of these documents. So that's what it's meant for. It's not meant for after you're already employed and after you've already been on the job for a few months. Only if they've required it prior to employment. That's what I intended to do with the bill.
So is there a way to verify which documents would be required? Is that going to be a part of the process to verify which documents are required before the exemptions to these fees are implemented? Or because I feel as though this list may entitle certain people to everything on the list, so perhaps we might need language relative to verifying the fact that only those that apply to your first time employment will be eligible for those fees. And I'm not sure if I see any language in here, but if the sponsor would be able to point me to that type of language, then I would appreciate that. But I think that concludes my concerns with the bill. Overall, I do think that giving accessibility to the workforce for those who greatly need it, and not only greatly need it, want to contribute to the economy of Guam, is an ultimate good for the island. So I do support this bill, but there are potential amendments to follow. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Colleagues, for a brief time, Senator Shelton's here. I would like to call for a short recess. We are back from recess. Before we break, we are on second reading for Bill 22-32. On the main motion, anyone wish to be recognized? Representative De Gracia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to bring everybody's attention to page 2, lines 7 and 8. I'd like to make an amendment to add so transcript of academic records issued by local colleges, universities, and to include also high school.
So we're just adding high school. Is that clear to everyone? On the amendment, anyone wish to be heard? Speaker Valencia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the sponsor of this amendment for introducing the amendment. I just wanted to clarify if it's on line 7F, item F, transcript of the academic records issued by local, and then we're adding high schools, and then colleges and universities. I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Speaker.
So amendment to the amendment is just...
No, I'm just
or
clarifying, Mr. Speaker.
Just clarify, so item F, transcript...
Yeah, I'd like to
transcript. Yeah, okay.
ask that question to the sponsor of the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Sponsor,
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. So on the amendment, is there anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing none on the amendment, any objection? Seeing no objection, amendment passes. Representative De Gracia, you still have the floor.
I have nothing further, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. On the bill, anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing none, Mr. Speaker, you're welcome to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank all my colleagues who spoke in support of this bill. Well, just one. And the good representative from GIGO as well, or from Simon Sanchez. Many of our island's youth is entering our workforce, Mr. Speaker, and this bill aims to remove the barriers for them to succeed in the first few jobs. And at this time, I'd like to make a motion to place bill number 22-32 onto the third reading file, Mr. Speaker.
Any objections? Seeing none, motion carries. We'll have a brief recess.
We're back in session. We're still on item 13, motions. Are there any other motions? Representative Kennedy, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to place Bill 23-32 into the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place bill number 23-32 into the second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue.
Okay. For Bill 23-32, I will be foregoing my opening statement. I'm going to open the floor for debate, and then I will give a closing statement and answer, or I will answer any questions, engage in any debate, and then give my closing statement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. On the main motion on Bill number 23-32, are there any member who wish to be recognized? On Bill number 23-32, any member who wish to be recognized? Seeing as there are none, Representative Kennedy, you're invited to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just a background for Bill 23-32. It is an act to amend Section 3105.1 of Article 1, Chapter 3 of Title 22, which is relative to the Independent Economic Impact Statement. I introduced this bill to clean up the language around the Independent Economic Impact Statement, because as it was currently written, it was only written for a one-time use during the last legislature. And myself, along with the Committee on Economic Development, Labor, and Tourism, thought it was important to every time we even consider raising or adjusting the minimum wage, that there should be an impact statement that informs the people of Guam what the changes will be. So all we did was strike out every date-specific portion of the law, and strike out every specific instance in this law, and added that the report be also transmitted to the Speaker of the Guam Youth Congress. So it's a very simple bill. All it does is clean up the language and allow for a economic impact statement for every minimum wage legislation debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. Is there a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to place Bill 23-32 into the third reading file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 23-32 onto the third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We are still in motions. Representative Kennedy, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to place Bill 25-32 onto the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 25-32 onto the second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue, Representative Kennedy.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Speaker and my fellow representatives. Bill 25-32, also known as the Guam Youth Congress Reform Act of 2019, is one of the key pieces of legislation I promised to introduce when I ran for this 32nd Guam Youth Congress. And this bill systematically changes parts of our enabling statute to allow for a more efficient, a more clarified version of how the Youth Congress should operate, how we would be constituted of members. It addresses our stipend, and it also addresses the need for special elections when seats are left vacant. The first major change in the bill is the switching of where our bills will be forwarded after they are passed. I propose moving it from the Committee on Rules in the Guam Legislature to the committee in the legislature that has oversight of the Youth Congress, and that our bills be stylized and introduced in the same way. Introduced by the committee, for example, this term it will be introduced by the Committee on Higher Education and the Advancement of Youth, Women, and Children by the request of the Youth Congress in accordance with 2 GCA Section 7102. And this was added in to allow for a more streamlined process of introducing our bill, along with working with our Youth Oversight Chair to introduce ideas that are important to the Youth Congress. And as our Oversight Chair, Senator Shelton has been very warm to this idea that once our bills are passed and introduced, that we can send them to her office so that they can be prepared and sent to the Committee on Rules on behalf of the Youth Congress. So I believe at least that's that extra step to help us in the legislature so that our bills can actually be forwarded with the power of a senator behind us before it reaches the Committee on Rules. The second major change is to the membership part of our enabling statute. We are eliminating the middle school or the junior high school seats. And then for each of the high schooler seats, we're adding the language that allows for charter schools to also have representation. And we move to the third major part, section 5, which is the vacancies. So we added the charter school language to the vacancy. And then we also, we struck out when special elections are held and put simply at the earliest convenience to fill the seat left vacant. So this can be left up to the school administrator / principal, the village mayor, or the president of UOG or GCC or any future post-secondary institution. And then finally, on the last section of this bill is on the compensation. I was encouraged by more than one senator to increase the stipend of the Guam Youth Congress. That's why I introduced that section of the bill. However, I have heard contention among this section of the bill already from some of my fellow representatives, so I look forward to maybe either debating that or seeing an amendment and going through the process for that. Other than that, everything in this bill is meant to help us streamline the process of the Guam Youth Congress, allows us to be more efficient, allows us to add more members in the special term, and to me, I feel this is a good step into getting some of our key pieces of legislation passed and getting a little bit more of a voice under our past bills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. On the main motion on Bill number 25-32, any member who wishes to be recognized. Representative Blas-Tyron, you're recognized.
I'd like to make an amendment to strike out Section 6 so that the increase of the stipend will not occur. And I'm making this amendment because I don't believe our efforts should be quantified, especially within the amount of compensation we get. And all of our representatives should be here to serve the youth because of their passion. And the stipend is just it does not matter. And so, yes, so I ask my colleagues to please support this amendment because I don't believe that the compensation is relative to why we are here, and I don't see the need for an increase at all. Si Diyos Masi.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. On the amendment, any member who wishes to be recognized. Representative Garrido.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually want to thank Representative Tyron for introducing this amendment. During the Committee on Rules meeting, I actually voiced my concern about this section, and I made the same amendment to strike out Section 6 of this bill. And although my sentiments were shared with some of the representatives that were at this meeting, ultimately we were unsuccessful in striking out Section 6 of this bill. So now that I have the opportunity to share my concerns about this bill with the Guam Youth Congress as a whole, I hope that we can change this and strike out Section 6 together and basically just not succumb to the temptations of money. So of course, more money would help any individual, but I personally did not make a pledge as a Guam Youth Congress representative to collect a paycheck, but rather because of the passion that I share with many of you guys, which is to contribute to the betterment of Guam. So this provision that increases our stipend is a statement from us as the body, as the Guam Youth Congress, that is saying that we think we deserve more money. This stipend increase is also saying that we are not content with the money that we are already afforded. And I don't think that this is the message that the Guam Youth Congress should send to the public. Whether it's a $25 raise or a $25,000 raise, if it's not warranted, then I don't think it should be given. So yeah, with all this said, I hope that each and every one of you can reconsider Section 6 of this bill and not give in to the temptation of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Garrido. Representative Santos, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to come out against this amendment for the reason that we have to take this in perspective of when the Youth Congress was, this amendment was passed. According to the Guam Youth Congress, or according to the Guam Court's archives, the last time the Youth Congress was given a stipend increase was in the 20th Guam legislature. And we have to think about how long ago that was and how much value we put into the efforts that youth have. You know, here, a lot of times the perspective of a lot of adult people is that youth labor should not be considered paid because youth labor has less value. And I think that the work that we're doing here today is valuable. And I think that we should feel validated knowing that the work that we do is getting recognition and is getting, and the work that we're doing has value that we're contributing to not only society, but also to the economy. I feel as though this resolution actually takes, or I feel like not giving us, I feel as though this amendment continues to ignore the value that youth work has. You know, I don't know if you guys remember this a while ago, but there was a proposal to have a youth minimum wage separate from the regular minimum wage. And I feel as though youth work should be valued. I wasn't here when the committee and the Committee on Rules discussed this, but I believe there was conversation talking about the standard when it comes to stipends in the government of Guam. And if we're sending the message that youth work is valued less than adult work in the government of Guam, then I see that as a reason why youth aren't involved into the government in the first place. And yes, we do have our reasons why we're here. We do have the value that we know that we want to make a difference. And I'm proud of every single one of you guys for being here and putting toward your agenda because you believe that you're doing the right thing for the youth of Guam. But the narrative of the way that youth are taught to themselves that they shouldn't value their work, things like unpaid internships, feeling like they have to take unpaid internships because that's their foot in the door, not realizing that their work should have value, and things like getting paid less than other people, even if they have more experience, just because they're young, is a problem in our community. And I feel as though we need to send the message that all those terms ago when they passed an increase, the economics on Guam are completely different. Many of us here recognize factors like inflation and factors like the economy fluctuating over time. And I feel as though we need to recognize that the youth of Guam, when they decide to be a part of the government, that their work is valued. And I feel as though this amendment tells the youth of Guam that their work is not valued. And I want everyone to recognize that their work has value. Everyone here on the Youth Congress floor to recognize that they should feel confident knowing that they are appreciated by the government of Guam and its policies. So I come out against this. I come out against this amendment, and I thank the sponsor for recognizing I thank the primary sponsor of the bill for recognizing the value that youth work has. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Santos. On the amendment, Representative Lorenzo and then Representative Kineni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say that I am in support of the amendment. Like Representative Garrido had said, when I first joined the Guam Youth Congress, I wasn't in it for the stipend. I did it because I wanted to learn more about my government, learn about the process, and I have fear that if we were to pass the bill as is without this amendment, then it's going to entice our young people to come in to just, like she said, get a paycheck. I think that would kind of weed out the ones who do want to come here to learn the process. So that's all I would like to say, and I am in full support of the Tyrone Amendment, and I urge my colleagues to do the same because we are here to be the voice for our schools and for our villages. We're not here to collect a paycheck. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lorenzo. Representative Kennedy? Oh, I'm sorry.
Also, one more thing I totally forgot. So for the upcoming fiscal year budget, we also got allotted $15,000. If we weren't allotted that $15,000, then I would have been against it because the extra money could have paid for resolution frames. But since we did get allotted that $15,000, I think the $25 increase is unnecessary because we do have that money that was appropriated. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lorenzo. Representative Kennedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess I'm going to do this in reverse order and go through everyone's claims in reverse order. So first for Secretary Lorenzo, yes, we were afforded that $15,000 by the Appropriations Committee and by the Guam legislature, and then eventually by the governor of Guam when she signed the budget bill into law. However, that $15,000 is just for its personnel, its operations, its bare minimum. That wouldn't have paid for all of the representatives, even if we kept it at $25,000 for 51 members, or $25 for 51 members. The appropriations also, which I went up and gave testimony for, it was supposed to increase to $30,000. However, the legislature and the appropriations chairs sought it that the legislature will cover any additional cost that happens over $15,000. That was the attitude given to me by Senator San Augustine. So that $15,000 really is kind of more of a benchmark for us. It's the first time we've had appropriations in the budget, and I appreciate that, but that's not a solid number. The second thing I would like to address also is the reason why I introduced this section specifically is to bring us in line with the boards and commissions on the islands of Guam. We are the least appropriated and the least funded government entity on the island, and we are also the least paid entity on this island, of course, with reserves to the voluntary boards. However, so I introduced this section to bring us in line with some of the boards and commissions on island, which do get $50 per meeting, and they're not allowed more than $100 per month for meeting at that time. And I thought that was fairly reasonable if how many boards and commissions can say we're going to get $50 for meeting about once a month or twice a month, that the Guam Youth Congress can afford to do the same thing also. Secondly, I would like to thank former Speaker Santos for saying that yes, youth labor is severely valued less here on the island than our adult counterpart labor. And if we say now that no, we're fine making less than everybody on this island, it sets a precedence that the youth can always just take the cutback, and that's not the image we're trying to present when we bring forth our ideas, which have almost the same full force as the Guam legislature. I am not asking for each representative here to get a salary. I'm not asking for anything dramatic. $50 a month is not something dramatic, especially in today's economic world. Our Sergeant at Arms was nice enough to post in the group chat, I don't know if you guys seen it yet, there's inflation data of what it would have looked like in 1989 versus 2019. $25 in 1989 had a lot more purchasing power than it does today. The inflation rate brings it up to what the $25 valued in 1989 is valued at $51 now. So it only makes sense, even inflation-wise and economic-wise, to raise our stipends, to account for inflation. And I'm not saying that we are increasing the stipend because we feel like we want to get paid more. I'm increasing the stipend because it helps those who come to session who don't have that even first job. Those who are still in high school, those who are in college but don't work a job. That $50 a month, though it may not seem a lot to those who work, such as myself and a couple of other members in here, that $50 does go a long way when you eventually either give it back to your parents or give it to someone for gas money, or you use it yourself for the rest of the month to get some food, I can see why we don't want to raise it either. I can see the message it sends. However, as a youth congress, we also must be the foot forward saying, this is what we do, this is the amount of work we put in, this is how much we feel we are worth. And if you do not feel you are worth $50 a month, then I apologize, because we do a lot of work here, and I believe we are worth way more than $50 a month. I appreciate the stipend I'm given, but $100 every 4 months, that's not a lot of money either if you really do break it down also. So I guess as the primary sponsor of this bill, the reason I added in the Section 6 was on a reward for the members who show up now, and an incentive for future members to say, there's Youth Congress, I can go share my ideas. They're compensated at the same rate as the board and commissions on island. They're respected in the same way that some of our government entities are, so why shouldn't I join, you know? It almost gives it almost a prestigious value also. We increase the value of our work, so we increase the work that comes out. It's a two-pronged process. So I do thank the author of this amendment for bringing up the issue of the pay raise. I thank him for bringing it to the attention of the Youth Congress. It was brought up in the Committee on Rules as at the time the acting chairwoman said that we brought this before the Committee of Rules, and it was voted down in the Committee of Rules because it was sought as a change that we should have left in place. And if all of our standing chairpersons and the speaker and the vice speaker and whoever was in attendance, our leadership basically allowed it to creep through to the floor, then I believe that this is something that they also, whether they had their own opinions on it, as a collective, they all kind of decided that this should be left in place. There was a vote on it, it was left in place. It's good for us, it's good for the Youth Congress, it's good for us individually, and it's a small reward for the work we've been doing and the work that is definitely going to continue to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. On the amendment, Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I support the intent of this section, but for me, the most successful people follow passion, not paycheck. And I believe that we need to see the broader picture of our government today. We have Simon Sanchez not fixed. We have GMH falling apart. And I think it's not a good timing for this section for a stipend increase right now, because we just finished the budget, and I know that the judiciary of Guam has been cut 1 million less, and it will affect their process in a way. Probably if we can all fix those things, what I've said earlier, like GMH, Simon Sanchez, then I believe we do need increase. But as of the moment, I believe that we need to see the broader picture. The sponsor of this bill has said that this stipend increase is good for us. But the thing is, we need to not benefit ourselves, but benefit the people that we represent. With that being said, I do support this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to do so.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. On the amendment, any other member who wishes to be recognized? Seeing as there are none, are there any objections to the amendment? There's been an objection. All those in favor of the amendment, of the Tyrant Amendment, please raise your hand. Amendment passes. On the main motion, or we're back to you, Representative Tyrant, if you had anything else. Representative Tyrant.
I'd just like to say si Diyos Mahal si Todos Hamzu for all of my colleagues, both those who were in favor and not in favor of the amendment, for sharing their perspectives and um, and so thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. I still do agree that effort and passion should not be quantified. And yeah, si just Mossy.
Thank you, Representative Tyrant. On the main motion now, any member who wish to be recognized? Representative Maige, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the sponsor of this bill.
Representative Kennedy, do you yield?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
On lines 54 and 55 on page 4, it says the amendment would be at their earliest convenience to fill the seat left vacant. I would just like to ask, how would an immediate filling of a seat be beneficial towards multiple people who share an interest in Guam Youth Congress rather than the interest of Guam Youth Congress's productivity?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I wanted to ask, how would an immediate filling of a seat be more beneficial towards those who share an interest in Guam Youth Congress rather than Guam Youth Congress's productivity?
Okay, so one of the reasons why I added in this section specifically is because I've been approached by multiple people, multiple schools, multiple districts that after the election, they were like, they finally heard of the Youth Congress through one way or another. And they were like, how do we join? What's the process of joining? And I'm just like, currently, if your seat wasn't left vacant by someone who already filled it in the beginning, there's really not a process for you to join because your seat's kind of permanently closed. So one of the things I wanted to do with this bill was to allow for a process to open up, allow for the seats to be opened up for a special election as soon as somebody steps down from that chair. And actually, that wasn't the only thing I wanted to do with this. I actually might add an amendment. But the other thing on the agenda today also is Resolution 24, which allows for every seat that's closed to be opened during the special election this year, so that we can fill the Youth Congress to the capacity that we're allowed to by law and go out for active recruitment for the body. So the benefit for this section is more for the people who want to join the Youth Congress but couldn't at the first time. We're giving them an opportunity to join the Youth Congress when a seat becomes vacant, and we give them an opportunity to join during the special election coming up on October 21st. I hope that answers your question.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yes. The only reason why I addressed this because originally I thought of the scenario as if two citizens or students have this desire to run for Guam Youth Congress, but it kind of would have seemed like a first come, first served basis. But other than that, I do support this bill in its original entirety, and I also encourage my fellow representatives to do so as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the sponsor of this bill.
Thank you, Representative Maige. On the main motion, any member who wishes to be recognized? You've already. Any other member who wishes to be recognized on the main motion?
Mr. Speaker, can I call for a recess to draft amendments?
We are in recess. We're back in session. We're on the main motion, Bill number 25-32. Any other member who wishes to speak on Bill 25? Representative Santos, you recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that that youth Congress reform needs to be something that's thought out more thoroughly. And I thank the committee for working on this bill to the best of the abilities. I apologize it wasn't on island when the committee met to hear the bill, but I would like the committee to have more opportunity to create greater reform. So I'd like to make a motion to send this bill back to the committee on just to send it back to the appropriate committee it was referred to. Okay, so I'll make the motion to refer this back to Committee on Rules.
There's been a motion to refer Bill number 25-32 to the Committee on Rules. Are there any objections? There's been an objection. All those in favor of referring Bill 25 back to committee, please raise your hand. Motion passes. We are still on motions. We still have 2 more items in our legislative session agenda. On the main, Representative Kennedy, you recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to place Resolution 24-32 onto the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 24-32 onto the second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue, Representative Kennedy.
Okay. I guess since the Reform Act needs a little bit more debate in committee and with the rest of the representatives, I feel it's imperative that Resolution 24-32 passes then, because this was supposed to be the stopgap measure between the Guam Youth Congress Reform Act and the special election coming up very soon. I've been, as I said previously, I've been approached by multiple people in multiple districts and schools asking, what's the process for joining the Youth Congress? And I looked through the rules, I looked through everything, and it says, and by law, we cannot add new members unless they're going to come in during the midterms and take a seat that was filled already when we were first inaugurated. And this resolution seeks to change Section 301 of our standing rules for the section that specifically addresses vacancies, and it's going to read, vacancies for those villages where no election was held shall be open to election during the special election held during the midterm of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress. And because this is our standing rules are specific just to our 32nd Youth Congress, I feel this language is appropriate to open up the chairs that can be so rightly filled in the midterms by energetic and wanting young people, these future representatives that want to join us and make their voices heard. So I feel like this opportunity during this special election to open up every seat that's available and to call out for elections, to call out for recruitment is something that the Youth Congress should be wholeheartedly invested into. So that's why I introduced this resolution along with Bill 25-32. So with that being said, I have nothing further to say on the resolution.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. On the main motion, any member who wishes to speak. Representative Santos, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this resolution because I believe that in order to have a thorough democracy, the barrier that is created when the term starts and those jurisdictions, whether they be a school or a village that aren't filled, having a barrier for the next 2 years really is a barrier to a lot of young leaders that are hoping to learn about policy and to learn about the legislative process. I also want to highlight the fact that the definition, the resolution reads that it should vacancies for those villages or schools where no election was held shall be open to election during the special election held during the midterm of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress. And I want to put it on the record that election during the midterm should be created, should be understood as separate from appointment during the midterm. Because I believe that a part of the Guam Youth Congress, learning the process is learning the democratic process, the electoral process, and being able to create your campaign in your school or going to talk to youth in your village, as many of us here have done. And in order to facilitate that democracy, I don't believe in the midterm that appointments should be accepted. But other than that, this resolution helps to open up democracy further that way, at least because, you know, the way that people are scheduled, the process where people are scheduled to be able to be eligible to run, 14 to 25 is a very narrow window, and for a lot of people, high school is a very narrow window. So when you hear about Youth Congress and you're running in Youth Congress, you might have been born, you might be a senior when it happens, or you might be a junior when it happens. So people have to make the decisions that are done best for them. And I feel as though opening it up to election will be able to facilitate the democracy and allow more access to many of the young leaders that are anxious to get started. So I support this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Santos. Representative Tyron on the main motion.
Sijos Maasi. I'd just like to say that I share the same sentiments as Representative Santos, and to thank the author of this for kind of seeing it as pertinent to giving the youth a chance. I myself had the honor to meet many different members of our youth who are very interested in learning more about the processes and about joining this legitimate body. And because of this, I see that this is really taking a step forward to open up more seats so that more of our youth can get the opportunities that they deserve to kind of pioneer leadership at such a young age. So I do think we will benefit from this, especially because we can add more people with different perspectives who come from different backgrounds, and more representation from both private, public institutions, as well as the various municipalities on our island. So I urge my colleagues as well to support this with me, and I see this as very useful, especially with the special election coming up. Sijos Masi.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. On the main motion, any member who wishes to speak? Seeing as there are none, Representative Kineni, you're invited to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank Speaker Santos and Majority Whip Tyron for supporting this measure. I believe it's crucial that, you know, we introduce more of the youth into what we do, introduce them, educate them, show them this is a perfect place for you to learn and to grow. And if this is something you want to do in the future, then that's something you ought to be able to join not 2 years from now, maybe not 2 years from now, hopefully now, you know. And in October, the 21st is going to be the third Monday of October. That's when special elections are going to be held. And I hope that, you know, as Youth Congress representatives, we can at least make the collective effort to push to recruit new members to our body, so that we can be fully represent the youth of Guam from every corner of the island, from Jigo to Mariso. We can represent every school from Southern High to Simon Sanchez and all the charter schools and every high school and private high school in between, you know. Leave no one out. That's going to be the next process after this resolution, is make sure we don't leave anyone out. We go reach out to each school that's eligible. We reach out to each village that does not have the right amount of representation yet. We recruit, and that's something that's one of the focal points also when I came into the Youth Congress, is also the growth of the Youth Congress, getting more people involved in us so that our body is bigger, more diverse, more ideas come out of it. And, you know, we introduce the youth to the way we do things a lot faster, because the Youth Congress is an incredible body. It's a body that allows for the change of the island once we decide ourselves this is a change we want. We write the bills, we write the resolutions, we send them to the legislature saying this is what the youth wants because we are the elected representatives of the youth. And in turn, we have that stronger voice among our peers on this island. So it's only fair that we make that voice a little bit stronger collectively by representing every youth on this island, not just the specific places that were, inaugurated at first glance. So thank you, and I hope I can count on your support for Resolution 24-32. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to place Resolution 24-32 into the third reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 24 onto the third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We're still in motions. Any Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding House rules, I move that Representative Kanani be reflected on the first roll call.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We still have one more item on our legislative session agenda. Are there any motions? Representative Tyron, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to move Resolution 25-32 to the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 25 onto the second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue, Representative Tyron.
Buenos den Hofade, Mr. Speaker, Secretary Lorenzo, as well as all of my other colleagues. This resolution 25-32 is something that really plays, it's a sensitive thing for many of us who call Guam home. While I was researching this topic,
Just point of inquiry, is this still the substituted version or is so?
Representative LeBang, the current copy that we have says as substituted by the prime sponsor.
But I think the Committee on Rules has not.
Point of order,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. The body
Yes,
has not
please state your point of
adopted
order.
the substituted version. As far as I'm aware, the Committee on Rules has adopted the original version, and I believe a motion is in order to discuss the substituted version.
We're in recess. We're back in session. And on that point of order, Representative Santos, I believe there is a motion to substitute.
can I make a motion to substitute Resolution 25-32?
There's been a motion to substitute resolution number 25-32 by the prime sponsor. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue, Representative Tyron, on
Right.
the substituted version.
See, just mossy. So I just want to share some sentiments for this very sensitive topic. And as I myself was doing more research about why the pause of the construction is necessary, and fortunately, the start of the construction for the live firing range complex at North Westfield doesn't start until May 2020, which I and the co-sponsor both saw as beneficial because there are so many valuable things within this landscape. I just want to touch on some of the significance of this. So there's a lot, the Northwest Field or Latektan contains many sites significant to heritage that, that contain laddie stones, mortars, and more. And as I was researching, I saw the need for more, for a greater time span in order to properly survey and thoroughly survey the land. The premises that the live firing range would be built on contains many of our native species, including and endangered species, including the Mariana fruit bat, the native tree snails, the small lizards, the Mariana crow, hawksbill, and green sea turtle, which could be beneficial for furthering scientific innovation on our island. Not only does this affect our research in science, but also the historical significance, as its land and seascapes tell of how our ancestors first came and cultivated our land. Resources also play a big part in the pertinence of this area, as Guam's northernmost aquifer runs through this premises. The exposure of many chemicals during the construction that is going to take place in May 2020 will include wet concrete and mortar, which release hazardous compounds into the air. These hazardous compounds can include calcium oxide, which is corrosive to human tissue, crystalline silica, which can be abrasive to human tissue, as well as chromium, which can cause allergic reaction when inhaled. And finally, I was really astounded by the lack of information given to the Guam Preservation Trust, who wish to had maintain this land, and because of the actions of the United States military, who constructed it without notifying the trust. That is also another big reason why I push for this resolution. Now I ask all of my colleagues to be in favor of this resolution, as it speaks of the youth being proactive and taking a stand against this injustice to our land that our ancestors cultivated, and for the many benefits that this land has given us, not only for research but throughout history. So I passed this this was made with the intent of not saying that the firing range will never get done, but for calling for more transparency in regards to this construction, and giving the land the proper surveying it needs from as many individuals as it will take to search it in a thorough manner, and to ensure that whatever historic significance, biological significance, cultural significance that is contained in the premises of Northwest Field is properly surveyed, extracted, and to ensure that we keep our natural landscapes, which serve much significance to the history of the Chamorro people, in a with upkeep and in a decent manner. Si Diyos maasi.
Thank you, Representative Tyrone. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the main motion? Representative Kaneni, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Wow. I would like to give my support for Resolution 25-32, as the newly appointed Vice Chair of Culture and Chamorro Affairs, I believe it is important that we as the youth of Guam and we as the people of Guam directly present our sentiment to the military that this is our cultural artifact, this is our history, this is, the story of our people. And to just bulldoze a site for a live firing range is disrespectful to the people, it's disrespectful to the culture, and it's disrespectful to the history that's been on this island since before they came here. And one of the things I found very disrespectful was when the governor wrote a letter to then Rear Admiral Chatfield saying that, asking for a pause so that we can check the site, so we can remove any artifacts and have the state historical preservation officer come in and do the routine procedures that we were denied right there and then, saying the Rear Admiral said we were continuing the construction as I guess progressed, and that we aren't going to stop because there's a deadline on this. And to me, that was not only disrespectful to our elected chief executive officer here on Guam, the governor of Guam. So our duly elected leader on this island couldn't stop construction that happened on her island. To me, that felt very disrespectful, very belittling of the U.S. military. The second thing was when Magua was announced, when a couple of other sites were announced, when Letetzan was announced as potential sites for construction, that people came out immediately for protecting these sites, and they seem to be brushed aside at every point of this journey so far. So I support this resolution because this tells at least the right officials that, hey, it's not only the grown-ups, it's not only the people of Guam, it's the youth of Guam that sees this too as a very important issue, because our future is going to be based on what cultural aspects are left here, what historical aspects have been left in place here. And when we ask for a pause for the construction, we weren't doing it to cancel the project. We were simply doing it to survey the land, get whatever historical artifacts or whatever historical remains were there, and then to construct a plan on how to move these things either out or how to preserve them in the places being held. And I feel that's not an unreasonable request. So I like the language says that call for more transparency in regard to the construction, because there really isn't that much transparency when it comes to the military and the government of Guam. And I feel that that's something that needs to be brought to their attention, is that you may be building a base here, but this is our island, this is our home, and we would like to preserve our cultural and historical aspects because that's who we are as a people. We don't have the right to flat out deny you to build here because we are U.S. territory, but at the same time, we would like to ask you to respect our cultural and historical significance. So I would like to thank the primary sponsor of this, Representative Tyron, and Culture and Chamorro Affairs co-sponsor, Chairman Quintanilla, for introducing this, because this is an important issue that needs to be brought up, not only before us, but before the people of Guam, so that they understand what's going on, so that they understand the significance and importance of what is going on, and that we hopefully put out a unified voice saying, let's take a pause, let's get what we need, and then let's evaluate from there. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kanani. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak on the resolution? Representative Quintanilla, you are recognized.
Speaking as a youth of Guam, I'm extremely concerned for the possible negative impacts posed by the currently proposed live firing range complex located at the Northwest Field. The Chamorro people have lost countless historic sites over the course of our recorded history. From the era of Spanish rule up until the present, the heritage of the Chamorro people has been corroded and lost. Speaking from personal experience, I am delighted every time I encounter a new artifact or learn of a new historic site. I hope that communicates the rarity of such priceless cultural symbols. So you can imagine the fire that ignited in me upon learning of the presence of historic sites being threatened due to the construction of a firing range. Imagine that. Ancient historic sites of the Chamorro people, a people who value peace and social harmony. Sites such as these being bulldozed so that where they once stood, soldiers may practice armed conflict. I feel that is a cruel irony.
Thank you, Representative Quintanilla. On the main motion, Representative Santos, you recognize.
I have a question for the primary sponsor, if he would yield.
Representative Tyron, do you yield?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I had a question in regards to the resolved clause relative to the governor of Guam asking the United States Navy to hire more state historic preservation officers. I don't understand, and I brought this point up to the co-sponsor. What is the process? Does the United States Navy give funds to the Guam Preservation Trust in order to hire a state historic preservation officer? Or, the State Historic Preservation Office, do those funds come from the U.S. Navy, or do they come from local funds?
Representative Tyron.
The issue in that clause has been brought to my attention, and my colleague will be introducing an amendment to not necessarily, or to change the wording so that it shows support and not necessarily to suggest the process, because we do not have the knowledge of the process today.
So the process is unclear how that resolution would, how that resolved clause would take effect, or that's in the process of being changed?
Representative Tyron.
It is unclear at the moment, but after the change of the wording, the intent will be different, because it will not talk about the process, rather talk about the support that we would encourage the governor to give in order to attain a historic officer.
We're going to take a 1-minute recess. We're back in session. We're on your question, Representative Santos. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, I was just asking about the process that the U.S. Navy has to hire state historic preservation officers. Would the primary sponsor have any information on how that process is supposed to play out?
Representative Tyron?
So according to the SEIS, the DoD would continue to support existing programs that contribute and/or donate excess equipment to local agencies. In accordance with the 2011 PA, DoD would provide liaison support to the Guam SHPO To assist in processing DoD actions.
Does that satisfy your question, Representative Santos?
Yes, but I do have another question to the primary sponsor. Does the primary sponsor believe that the liaison assistance, that the military assistance to the State Historic Preservation Officer is, I guess the word would be unbiased? Because to my understanding of what happened, what happened in a lot of situations such as Magua is that when the historical preservation officer from the military says that there's no placement, that there's no historical village in the area or historical significance of the area, then that's what happened. Then construction is allowed to go, but in the state, if the State Historical Preservation Office has any concerns, then the U.S. military takes the ruling of the military's historians over the state or Guam's local historians. So my question is, do you believe that that having the U.S. Navy assist in the State Historic Preservation Office is unbiased or doesn't leave room for them to sway the opinion of the State Historic Preservation Office in regards to these important historical lands?
Representative Tyron?
So the professionals and roles implemented, no matter of how or who hires them, I cannot speak as to the integrity of the people who will be selected, but being that they are professionals within this field of work, I do feel as they would do proper examination regardless of how they are and who they are attained by.
Representative Santos?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you to the primary sponsor for answering my questions. I do recognize that, everyone has room for bias and everyone has their own opinions, but at the same time, I do not want there to be a conflict with the Guam State Historic Preservation Office and historians in the military, where historians in the military will say, no, I don't think that's historically significant enough to preserve, but the State Historic Preservation Office, or even the community of Guam in general, if they have a claim that their Historic Preservation Office should be advocating for the preservation of a certain area, that they should be heard too. I support this. I support the resolution in itself because I do think that I support the intent of the resolution because I do think that the Chamorro village, all of our historic preservation, or all of our historical sites and artifacts that are potentially in this area should be examined and preserved. But my hesitation with this resolution is if the military is the one that wants to develop this historic preservation, or who wants to develop this historically cultural site and create developments there, do they not have an incentive to be biased towards supporting the development? And another concern that I have is, do these historians have an understanding of what is cultural to Guam if they are not from Guam and if they are representing the military? And I know that's a bunch of hypotheticals, but I would hope that the U.S. Navy has the understanding to be able to hire someone who is experienced in this and be able to understand Chamorro historical preservations, but I still have my reservations with the biases that the Navy might have in developing these lands. So I understand the intent of this resolution, but that resolved clause has me concerned because I think that having a historic preservation officer or having more historic preservation officers hired by the U.S. Navy could lead to a situation where these historic preservation officers from the Navy have the majority and have more of an understanding to say that's not historic, whereas the State Historic Preservation Office on Guam isn't being heard. So that's my hesitation. But I support the intent of this resolution, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the time to testify.
Thank you, Representative Santos. Any other member who wishes to speak on the main motion? Representative Garrido, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to express my support for this bill. Although there are some warranted concerns, I think the overall theme of this bill is justified. Military occupation is no stranger on Guam, and the military already occupies a substantial portion of the island. So I think that it's really important to place significance on issues like these. I also appreciate this resolution because I think it highlights the importance of the self-determination process. This resolution really shows how the U.S. unilaterally makes decisions on Guam, despite apparent resistance from the people here. To self-determine means that we choose our political status and, as an effect, our government for our island. This means that we get to choose what happens here, no matter what political status is chosen. I just want to clarify that I'm not advocating for a particular political status, but rather that we should just choose a different status rather than our current status quo. And really to prevent actions from being imposed on Guam without consent, such as the ones here in this resolution. And yeah, I think that this resolution just makes the importance of self-determination apparent. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Garrido. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Seeing as there are none, Representative Tyron, you're invited to close.
Sijos Maasi Todas Hamdu for everyone who both showed support and also for the concerns expressed by my colleague or the good representative from Barrigada. It is much appreciated the perspectives given and knowing that we all who are present today care about this immense issue, not just for indigenous people to Guam, but for all Guamanians, and that we see the importance in maintaining the beauty, historical significance, cultural significance, biological significance, and the significance of the resources within the premises of where this construction will be happening next year. The use of such a land that's been passed down since the first inhabitants of this island came here speaks of how our ancestors, the native and indigenous people of Guam, the Chamorro people, cultivated and grew, and this construction threatens knowledge about the evolution of ourselves and how we came to where we are today. The land provides cultural resources, as many of the plants contained in it serve as traditional Chamorro healing plants used by our Surahanas and Surahanus, and is a dying art today. Once again, I'd just like to say Sijos Maasi Todas Hamdu for the sharing of all of your perspectives on this immense and important topic. And I think that everyone, or I hope everyone, can find it in themselves to support this resolution, as it takes a stand to say that the youth of our island will not stand for the injustices being done to our land, which our ancestors have cultivated. Sijos Maasi.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to move resolution 25-32 to the third reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 25 onto the third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Well, we've exhausted all items on our second reading file, and we'll now move on to item 17, the second roll call. Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move that second roll call reflect first roll call.
There's been a motion made that second roll call reflect first roll call. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Mr. Speaker, I also make a motion to excuse members not present today.
There's been a motion to excuse members not present today. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Also make a motion to waive engrossment of all bills and resolutions discussed today.
There's been a motion to waive the engrossment of all bills and resolutions discussed today. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We are now on item 18, the consideration of the daily file and the third reading file. Representative Kennedy, you recognize?
Mr. Speaker, I still had one more motion. Because of the vacancy left by Representative Dolahan and the subsequent acting vacancy left by Representative Bloss, I would like to make a motion to open up the Committee on Taxation and General Government Operations, the chairmanship for election.
Okay. We were actually planning to do that after voting, but if we want to deal with that right now, we can do that. Okay, let's table that motion after voting. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Still on the consideration of the daily file, the third reading file, Mr. Secretary, on bill number 22-32, please read the title.
Bill number 22-32, as amended by the Committee on Economic Development, Labor, and Tourism, introduced by Christian F. Valencia. An act relative to waiving government fees and charges in the issuance of documents required in the application for employment of first-time job seekers, and to cite this act as the Welcome to the Workforce Act of 2019.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeGracia. Representative DeGracia, pass. Representative Dinsman? Representative Dinsman, aye. Representative Felician? Representative Felician, aye. Representative Garrido? Representative Garrido, aye. Representative LeBang? Representative LeBang, aye. Representative Lorenzo? Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative Maige? Representative Maige, aye. Representative Pareda? Representative Pareda, aye. Representative Kineni? Representative Kineni, aye. Representative Quintanilla? Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Javen Santos? Representative Javen Santos, pass. Representative Tyron? Representative Tyron, aye. Representative Valencia? Representative Christian Valencia?
It's a yes for me.
Representative Christian Valencia, aye. Representative Isabel Valencia? Representative Isabel Valencia, aye. Representative DeGracia? Representative DeGracia, aye. Representative Javen Santos? Representative Javen Santos, aye.
Bill number 22-32 as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor received 14 ayes and 9 absent. Bill number 22-32 hereby passes. On bill number 23-32, Mr. Secretary.
Bill number 23-32, as substituted by the Committee on Economic Development, Labor, and Tourism, introduced by Representative Kineni, An act to amend Section 3105.1 of Article 1, Chapter 3 of Title 22, Guam Code annotated relative to the Independent Economic Impact Statement.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeGracia. Representative DeGracia, aye. Representative Dinsman. Representative Dinsman, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, pass. Representative Garrido. Representative Garrido, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, pass. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, pass. Representative Maige. Representative Maige, pass. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, aye. Representative Kineni. Representative Kineni, aye. Representative Quintanilla. Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Javen Santos. Representative Javen Santos, pass. Representative Tyron. Representative Tyron, aye. Representative Christian Valencia. Representative Christian Valencia, pass. Representative Isabel Valencia. Representative Isabel Valencia, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, pass. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, pass. Representative Maige. Representative Maige, aye. Representative Javen Santos. Representative Javen Santos, nay. Representative Christian Valencia. Representative Christian Valencia, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, aye.
Bill number 23-32 as substituted by the committee received 13 yes, 1 nay, and 9 absences. Bill number 23-32 hereby passes. Moving on to resolution number 24-32. Mr. Secretary, please read the title.
Resolution number 24-32, introduced by Representative Kennedy, relative to amending Section 3.01 of the Standing Rules of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress, opening the permanent vacancy seats unfilled in the initial election of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeGracia. Representative DeGracia, aye. Representative Dinsman. Representative Dinsman, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, pass. Representative Garrido. Representative Garrido, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, pass. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, pass. Representative Maige. Representative Maige, aye. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, aye. Representative Kineni. Representative Kineni, aye. Representative Quintanilla. Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Javen Santos. Representative Javen Santos, aye. Representative Tyron. Representative Tyron, aye. Representative Christian Valencia. Representative Christian Valencia, aye. Representative Isabel Valencia. Representative Isabel Valencia, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, pass. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, aye.
Resolution number 24-32 received 14 ayes, and there are 9 absent. Resolution number 24-32 hereby passes. Moving on to resolution number 25-32. Mr. Secretary, please read the title.
Resolution number 25-32, introduced by Representatives Tyron and Quintanilla, relative to calling for a pause on the construction of the live firing range complex at the Northwest Field, and to further call for actions for such impacts that the military buildup brings to the island of Guam.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeGracia.
Point of order, it's a wrong title.
We substituted.
Sorry.
So we are now voting on resolution number 25-32 as substituted on the floor.
Resolution number 25-32 as substituted by the prime sponsor, introduced by Representatives Tyron and Quintanilla, relative to calling for more transparency in regard to the construction of the live firing range complex at the Northwest Field, and to further call for actions for such impacts that the military buildup brings to the island of Guam.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeGracia. Representative DeGracia, aye. Representative Dinsman. Representative Dinsman, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, aye. Representative Garrido. Representative Garrido, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative Maige. Representative Maige, aye. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, aye. Representative Kineni. Representative Kineni, aye. Representative Quintanilla. Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Javen Santos. Representative Javen Santos, aye. Representative Tyron. Representative Tyron, aye. Representative Christian Valencia. Representative Christian Valencia, aye. Representative Isabel Valencia. Representative Isabel Valencia, aye.
Resolution number 25-32 received 14 ayes and there are 9 absent. Resolution number 25-32 hereby passes. We've exhausted all items on our third reading file. I will now come back to the motion made by Representative Kineni to open the floor, the nominations for the vacant chairpersonship for the Committee on Taxation and Government Operations. And now, we open the floor for nominations. Representative Lorenzo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would like to nominate Representative Vicente Tyrone for the chairman on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lorenzo. Representative Tyron, do you accept the nomination?
Again, I do accept.
Point of inquiry, Mr. Chair. Do they have to currently be a member of the committee in order to be nominated?
No, Representative Santos. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So, Representative Tyron, are there any other nominations? Representative Quintanilla, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I nominate Representative Kineni for the chairmanship position.
Okay. Representative Kineni, do you accept?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I accept the nomination.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for the chairmanship? If there are none, is there a motion to close the nominations? Representative Labang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move to close nominations.
There's been a motion to close the nominations for the chairmanship for the Committee on Taxation and Government Operations. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. And right now, I'm gonna provide the opportunity for the 2 nominated to state yes. So I'm gonna provide you the opportunity to speak as to why the Guam Youth Congress, why the body should choose you as the next chairman for the committee, and you will be allotted a minute. Okay. Representative Tyron, since you were nominated first.
Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to say that to my colleagues that though this is my first term in Guam Youth Congress, I think that I've taken up many new things and I have I've really tried to get insight into the legislative process and tried my best as a representative of my municipality, but more so as representative of the youth. And after looking over the Otin Reglamento and seeing this ever since Representative DeLohan had inquired if I'd like to be it, it really shows me as to it really showed me as to the pertinence of this duty. And I do feel that I feel like my actions do speak competence as well as organization. And although I may not have the most experience, I feel that I can do this duty well, and I will take time and put effort into this duty. So with that being said, I ask for your support, and I hope you consider me for this position. Sitos Maasi Todas Hamtu.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a representative in the 30th Guam Youth Congress and the 32nd Guam Youth Congress, in the 30th I was the former chairman of the Committee of Military Affairs, Homeland Security, and Health and Human Services. I have experience when it comes to organizing and running a committee. As the vice chair of economic development, I've been responsible for most of the documents that come through that committee anyways. And as taxation and general government operations chair, most of my bills have actually gone through this committee. It's the committee I've spent most of my 32nd term working on, which is government organization, which is allocation of funds, which is understanding, certain bills that are a lot more complicated than the normal bills that go through other committees. And the reason why I'm running for general government operation is that the government of Guam needs to figure out ways to reorganize and to collect more funds, and this is something that will be a project of mine as chair of the General Government Operation Committee. So I ask for your vote because I not only have the experience, I have the internship experience, I have the legislative experience, and I have the experience here in the Guam Youth Congress to lead this committee to do a lot more work for the youth of Guam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. And now, let's vote. All those in favor of Representative Tyron to serve as the next chairman, please raise your hand. Is this how we're doing this? All those in favor of, thank you. All those in favor of Representative Kennedy to serve as the next chairman, please raise your hand. Okay, Representative Tyron received 6 votes and Representative Kennedy received 8. Congratulations, Representative Kennedy. We're now on brief extension of remarks. Are there any member who wish to be recognized? Representative Santos.
Mr. Speaker, I would also like to make a motion to open the floor for nominations for Committee on Land and Environment. Representative DeHelig also graduated, and that's also a committee that's open for a new chairperson.
Right. Thank you, Representative Santos. I apologize. There's been a motion to open the nominations for the vacant chairmanship of the Committee on Land and Environment. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. The floor is now open for nominations. Representative Santos, you're recognized.
I nominate Representative Isabel Valencia.
Thank you. Representative Valencia, do you accept?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
I nominate Representative Blas Hiron to serve on that committee.
Representative Tyron, do you accept?
Sijus Maasi, but I do not accept this nomination.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Seeing as there are none, is there a motion to close? Representative Kennedy.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to close nominations on the committee chairmanship for land and environment.
There's been a motion to close the nominations for the vacant chairpersonship of the Committee on Land and Environment. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Well, congratulations, Representative Valencia. Thank you. And now we are on item 19, brief extension of remarks. Any member who wishes to be recognized. Representative Tyron and then Representative Kennedy.
First of all, I'd just like to thank Secretary Lorenzo for nominating me. And although I wasn't successful in the election of the chair, I do wish to congratulate Representative Kennedy because I feel confident in his knowledge and experience that he will lead the committee to be prosperous and to produce legislations that will further improve in that realm for the youth. So congratulations and thank you to all those who supported me. Sijus Masi.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. Representative Kennedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the same sentiment, I would like to thank everybody who voted for me for the chairmanship. It's, I guess when I came into this term, it was not one I sought after, but after working through the 32nd Youth Congress, I believe there's a lot more government reform work and a lot more finance work to look at so that we can run efficiently. I would like to thank Representative Tyron for at least stepping up and running for the position to show that this is a very important position in the Guam Youth Congress, because as chairman of the Taxation and General Government Operations, we are one of the specific privileges that we have is leading the committee on the whole when there's appropriation bills on the floor or bills that require appropriation. And it's important to discuss those bills in great length with all the members, not just the committee. And that's something I look forward to doing with this body. I look forward to working with each and every one of you. And if anyone wishes to join the committee, I send an open invitation now because there are open slots. And when the midterms come around in October, I know a lot more of these committees are going to be filled to the brim again. So if you do have the passion or you do have at least the interest in learning more about our government or learning more about taxation and how generally the government operates, you know, at least what's been designated to the committee, I invite you to join and have discussions with us because it will be a lively committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. Any other member who wishes to be recognized? Representative Maige, you recognized. And then Representative Valencia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I do support Resolution 25-32, I would also like to state that the cause of the firing range construction is due to the fact that by October of 2024, a transfer of 1,700 Marines from Okinawa to Guam is expected to start, with 3,300 others rotating in and out by 2026. While it is extremely important to preserve the culture and environment of our island, I respectfully call out to both Government of Guam officials and U.S. military representatives to elaborate on a solution to the controversial situation of the live firing range construction in Litexen that is satisfactory to both parties, while keeping the transfer of Marines into consideration. As a local of Guam and military dependent, I wish for both sides to the situation to come to a peaceful agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Maige. Representative Valencia, you recognized.
First, I'd like to thank Representative former Speaker Santos for the nomination for the chairperson position. I'd like to thank everybody for I don't know, like not nominating the others. Okay. I look forward to working as the chairperson for the Committee on Land and Environment, and though I don't have that much experience, I look forward to learning on how to lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Any other member who wishes to speak? On brief extension of remarks. Seeing as there are none, we'll move on to announcements. Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
So last August 15, the Public Policy Institute summer cohort has ended, and I had a great privilege to graduate along with Representative Quintaniza and Representative Kaida Trinidad. And once the door closes, a new window opens. So for the listening public and to the rest of the body, if you're interested in joining the Public Policy Institute, they're looking for a new team, and to get the application, you need to call the Office of Speaker Tina Munya Barnes at 477-2520 or email speaker@guamlegislature.org to ask for the application. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. Representative Quintaniza, you're recognized.
Before I begin my announcements, could we have the application packet mentioned by Representative LeBang added to our website so that it may be made available?
Sure, we'll request that Representative LeBang put it on the group chat. Yeah.
I'd like to announce that next week, Friday and Thursday, I apologize, my phone just died, so my calendar's not working. I don't know the dates. Next week, Thursday and Friday, the Decolonization Conference will be held from 8 to 5 p.m. at the Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort. Currently, there are, subject to correction, there are 5 seats reserved for Guam Youth Congress members. Does that answer your question? Okay. And also, on September 17th to September 21st, I will be off island attending the Asian American Pacific Islander Advancing Youth Justice Leadership Conference. And also, tentatively, there will be a October United Nations Committee on Decolonization Conference. The dates have yet to be confirmed, and my attendance has yet to be confirmed as well.
Thank you, Representative Quintaniza. More on the self-determination conference, since there are 5 seats open for the Youth Congress. If you would like to go, please let me know. Okay, I'll do it on a first-come, first-served basis for the self-determination conference. Okay, now on any other announcements. Representative Garrido, you recognize.
Sorry, I just want to add to what Representative Quintaniza said. So yeah, 5 seats available is limited. However, I believe there are still seats open for UOG students. So in order to, I guess, have more people come in, if you're a UOG student, as of yesterday, I believe there was openings. So you can just come to me and let me know, and then I can relay the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Garrido. Representative Tyron.
I just want to take this time to acknowledge the efforts of all of those, of all of the UOG students and faculty who took part in the history of the Marianas Conference, which I had the privilege to attend, and I saw Representative Garrido there. Just Maasi for all the efforts. It was so nice gathering as a community who care about the Marianas and listening and gaining knowledge on different topics that are very relevant to today. Me personally, as I look into different professions, but especially within the realms of business administration and or tourism, it's very interesting to me realizing the impacts that these have and trying to find a way that we can represent our culture kind of better within the realm or within the industry of tourism. I'd also like to say on another topic that my school community is hosting a benefit concert on Sunday, the 15th of September, in the Dale Jenkins Gymnasium to support an orphanage that a group of or certain people from our school will be going to and performing at. If you are interested in attending, you can go to the St. John's front office, or you can contact me, and I will point you in with a contact of information, or yeah, a contact that has information about it. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to come. Everyone in the community is invited. There will be performances by our orchestra and our glee club, singing a variety of genres. So, yeah, Caesar Smasi.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. Any other announcements? Representative Quintanilla.
I forgot to mention this earlier, but I believe next week, Monday, is National Deaf Awareness Day month week. Oh yes, Monday is a proclamation signing for Deaf Awareness Month. Deaf Awareness Month.
Thank you, Representative Quintanilla. Did everybody hear that? Okay, good. Any other announcements? Representative Valencia.
Okay, so from until October 19, iBogs is accepting donations for new or still in good condition clothes, shoes, school uniforms, and school supplies. I'm not an iBogs rep, but if you have those supplies that you'd like to donate, you can drop it off at the Department of Education building in Tizen, and that's about it.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Are there any other announcements? If there are none, okay, Representative Labang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we adjourn this session
Oh, wait,
subject to the
sorry.
call speaker.
I actually have an announcement.
Oh, sorry. Withdraw that motion.
Sorry. We received opinion from the Legal Bureau of the Legislature regarding our sessions, and it was decided that it was opined that our sessions we shouldn't consider it as every third Saturday of the month, that we should consider it every third Saturday. So every 3 Saturdays, starting from today, I will be calling sessions. So please adjust your schedules. Okay? Now, Representative Lang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, now I move that we adjourn subject to the call of the speaker.
There's been a motion to adjourn this session subject to the call of the speaker. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.